Mm-hmm. All right, so now let's introduce our panel. I'm just going to kind of go in the order that I see you all on my screen. So Ambureen, would you like to start?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Ambureen Rana. I use both she, her, and they, them pronouns. I am the community organizer at Maine Equal Justice right now. We're an organization that our focus is on economic justice and empowering folks to advocate for themselves. I got into community organizing. I really appreciate that Logan touched on how, your college choice, your school choice doesn't necessarily have to lead here. So I've always been interested in social justice, always attending events like this, spending my summers a part of social justice institutes all throughout high school. But I actually studied biology in college. Even though I knew that I always wanted to work at a nonprofit, I always wanted to work with people. But my senior year of college, I started volunteering at an LGBTQ youth group. And that volunteering actually turned into a part-time job as an advocate for LGBTQ youth, which actually became a full-time job as soon as I graduated with that degree. And, I spent 3 years at one organization, then transitioned to this organization, and I've just been a community organizer for 5 years, simply by starting a volunteer job that I was really passionate about and letting that take me into this career.
So, well, thanks so much, Ambureen. We're super happy to have you with us. Jillian, do you want to go next?
I would love to. Thank you, Logan. My name is Jillian. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an organizer on the Planned Parenthood Maine Action Team. So you probably know a little bit about what Planned Parenthood does, but we provide sexual and reproductive health care to everyone who needs it. And so I, also am loving that we are sharing that your college degree doesn't necessarily determine where you're going to end up, right? I went to college also for theater, and here I am. But when I was in high school, I started becoming an activist and started realizing that what I really cared about, the people that I loved and what mattered to them, and that there were really specific and effective ways that I could be an activist to help solve some problems and help make the world better for the people I loved. And so I joined the Gay Straight Alliance in high school, and then when I was living in Boston, would help make some phone calls and canvass up to Maine. The second to last time we tried to legalize gay marriage in Maine. And then while I was in college, went to Planned Parenthood as a patient and just had this feeling of like, I gotta do something to help this organization because this healthcare is so great. So when I moved back to Maine, I didn't have a lot of money, but I had a lot of time to give. So I ended up spending a lot of time volunteering for Planned Parenthood, a lot of phone banking, so that's making phone calls to voters and supporters, a lot of door-to-door canvassing, and a lot of big events like a Pride Festival or the Common Ground Fair, stuff like that. And then I worked so hard that they knew that I was essential to the team, and they hired me, and here I am ever since. So a lot of what I do is organizing a door-to-door canvassing program, and then a program where we collect and develop stories from the people who use our services.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Super excited to have you. And also just, Jillian was the person who managed me when I was a volunteer. And so it's really awesome to kind of have this come full circle. It was also nice to be like, oh my gosh, there is a person who did theater stuff. And apparently you're allowed to do, things besides theater if you get a theater degree. So.
Oh yeah, and so much applicable, teamwork, and there's a lot of like performance aspects of
There's
doing
script
theater.
analysis, there's stories.
Yeah.
It's all theatrical in some way as well. All right, let's move on to Abbie.
Hi, my name's Abbie Strout-Bench, and sorry, for some reason I'm Mabel Wadsworth today. I use she, her pronouns, and I do work at Mabel Wadsworth Center. We're also a sexual and reproductive health care provider in Bangor. We provide a wide range of services, so like birth control, abortion care, prenatal care, hormone therapy for trans people, mental health counseling, and we started offering primary care. So that's like the focus of the organization that I work for. I'm the director of community engagement, and I have been working at the center for 10 years now, which means I have been community organizing for a very long time. I got involved actually as a student at the University of Maine. I was part of the feminist group on campus and organized events and fundraisers and things like that. And my advisor from that group was one of the founders of Mabel Wadsworth Center. So I learned about this organization, which has a deep history in community organizing. The center was founded by 5 people who saw this need and just gathered community support, and now we have a thriving health center. So that's how I got connected to the organization, and they just haven't been able to get rid of me. I've been there ever since.
Well, thanks so much for joining. And then
thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, and our last panelist is Maggie.
Hi. Thanks, guys. My name is Maggie Bouchard. I also work at Planned Parenthood Maine Action Fund. I use they, them pronouns. Jillian kind of gave our little synopsis of what we do at our work with reproductive rights and providing reproductive health care. So thanks, Jillian. I, similar to some of these people on this call, also got into organizing through just volunteering in my community and being a part of my community. I actually started mentoring when I was in high school and fell in love with the community feel and the team feel of getting people where they wanted to go and giving people the resources that they needed in order to succeed and live the life that they wanted. So from there, I just started canvassing, going to as much outreach as I could, interacting with a lot of different organizations, and also went to the University of Maine and was having a lot more fun investing my free time in these groups and clubs and spaces that supported students, and met them where they're at rather than in my classes a lot of the times. And I gained so much experience from that. I met so many beautiful people and really grounded myself in the relationships. I am an organizer because of relationships, and I love my job because of the relationships that I build with people all the time. And shout out to this chat. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, thanks for coming and also supplying like yet another undercut that's better than mine right now. You and Dusty really are like wiping the floor with
My undercut lacking right now.
I don't, it's just.
I'll leave my clippers on your doorstep, Logan. Just let me know.
Thank you. See, that is the direct community support that we need right now. Okay, so I wanted to move in, and pretty much what I envisioned this as is just a question and answer kind of thing. I have a couple of baseline questions to get us started, and some questions from the Google form. And while I absolutely love all of the love happening in the chat right now, also please put your questions into the chat as well. And Dusty is going to be grabbing them, and when we finish up with a question, we'll go to her, and she will have a fresh question for us. But we have a couple of basics that I just wanted to get out of the way, which is the big question: what is community organizing? And does anybody have just a summary of what they think really kind of embodies that field? And I'm not going to be the one to answer that question.
I can start, and then maybe people can jump in and add to their definition and
absolutely, yeah,
and how they feel. But I think community organizing is like Maggie had just mentioned, all about building relationships with people and making connections. I think it's about connecting with your community members one-on-one, and you can't really work together unless you establish a relationship first, get to know each other, understand where they came from, you understand, so understanding where they came from, them understanding where you are coming from, and figuring out together how issues are impacting your lives and connecting around that. And I think it's also about taking those relationships and bringing them together to create a community, building community together. And when I say community, I mean like a group of people that are able to like feel encouraged by each other, are able to build together so that they can work together on a certain issue.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Does anybody else have something that they wanted to add to that?
I'll just add real quick that when I first started organizing, I think I wanted to put my ideas into action, and I quickly learned that there's a lot more to it in listening and developing relationships and coming up with ideas together that makes any one person's idea stronger and really pushes your visions forward. So I just wanted to add that because I think that's not where I started from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a really great point. And I don't know, I think for when I was a new organizer, I got caught up on like whether or not I was able to come up with all of the best ideas, or like, do I need to have like an entire campaign in my head? And it really starts with just connecting to a community so that you have a realistic idea of what their needs are. Like you sometimes don't even have to come up with ideas. You just need to learn about what the needs in your community already are. So yeah, and I think it's also about finding creative ways to mobilize that community around a common cause. But usually those causes become pretty apparent once you've kind of spent that time connecting. So one question that we got a couple of times and in a couple of different ways was how do you successfully get people to listen to your ideas and to support your cause? And what are some of the most effective ways to do that as a student? We also got a couple of comments basically relating to the fact that it sometimes feels really hard to make your voice heard as a student. And so what are some of your best ways to get the message out? And especially if you have any advice for students. Come on up, bud. Jillian, do you think you might have any tips? Or so I saw Maggie, I saw you unmuted yourself. So
I was gonna say I feel like Jillian should.
Where are my glasses?
Yeah, well, I think as far as getting your message out there, I think for me where it really starts is honestly understanding what the message is and what you're asking for and what you need. So it starts with a deep understanding and a deep listening to yourself, your peers, your community, assessing what needs to change or what could be better about our systems, about our lives in general. So that when you do go to make your ask or broadcast a message to your community, you can be confident and strong and grounded and know that everything you're doing is in service to those goals. And then I think in terms of getting it out there, there are considerations to make about the message itself, the language that you want to be using, and the venue by which you want to get it out. So there are lots of different tactics for getting a message out into the world. I'm sure you've all seen or probably even attended a public demonstration, social media, traditional media like newspapers and TV. Maybe you would I did this in school, like print out some flyers and post them up all over the school, right? But not every tactic is going to make sense for every message, if that makes sense. So you want to think about, like, what am I trying to accomplish? What are the best words that can speak to my audience, and what's the best tactic to use? And that's the other part too, is your audience, right? Like, who are you trying to reach with this message? Are you trying to reach your peers? Are you trying to reach your teachers or your legislators or the school board or whomever you're trying to reach? Like, what message, what tactic is going to speak to that goal and speak to the audience the best? I think that's.
I think that totally is it. And not to talk about theater things ad nauseum, but one of the main things that I recognized that was a commonality was that, goal of knowing what your message is and knowing who your audience is, trying to get your message to read with your audience in as few words as possible if you can manage it. Because it's really easy to kind of get into the weeds on an issue, but sometimes when you spend too much time going into all that detail, it's not actually getting like the main point that you want to get across. Did anybody else have something to add specifically in terms of maybe challenges you might have faced in getting the word out as a student? And maybe, because obviously everybody, all of our attendees are students, and it can feel really hard to get your message heard when you're still in school like that. Did anybody have anything to add, or an experience you might have had when you were a student organizer?
I would say, kind of touching on what Jillian had said, you do not have to have the same life experience to have someone value your message. You don't have to be going through the same things as someone else for someone to really hear what it is you're working on, or what you're passionate about, or what you want to change in your society. And I think oftentimes as students, there's a little bit of undercutting that happens from adults at times, not for the wrong reasons, but it does happen. And I believe in just speaking as honestly as you possibly can. There's no right way to organize, and there's no perfect way to get your message across. But the great thing about students is there's a lot of young people, and y'all get to connect with each other all of the time, like in spaces like this. So if my message isn't coming across, I find other people who resonate with that message or find that message important as well, even if it's not the same as their own, and find those intersections between our messages to create more power, because with more people, we have more power. And I think what y'all are doing right now is phenomenal. You're already doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that, once again, the message that everyone's getting is there's no perfect way to become a community organizer, and there is no perfect way to organize your community, because every community is different and every issue is different. And the way you approach it is first off, you're never going to be able to do it perfectly. There's always something that you do it and you're like, oh, I wish I had done that a little bit better, but you still showed up and you still did it, which I think is a really great message to keep in mind. Sometimes you do just need to kind of show up and give it your best shot. Dusty, do you have a question for the panel?
Yeah, definitely. One of the questions I'd wanted to ask that came up in the chat, I actually think Maggie just did a great job answering about how do you have people take you seriously when you're just getting started, and you really spoke well to that. So another question that is coming up again and again is, where do you draw your confidence from? And when you have stage fright, when you're anxious moving forward, how do you have the strength to find that confidence?
Maybe Abbie or Ambureen could take on this question, as we heard from Maggie and Jillian last.
Sure. I can start, and then Abbie, if you want to add in. But for me, just from my experience, it's really just been practice. So I have found, like, one of the things that was the hardest for me was cold calling. So making phone calls to people that I had never met before, who I've never talked to before. Because I just started this community organizing job at this organization 2 years ago. And, like, these are people that have built relationships with my organization, but I don't know them. And I just found, like, I would sit in front of the phone so scared to call someone because of not knowing how that conversation was going to go, not knowing how they were going to receive me. But as soon as I picked up that phone, dialed, and they started talking to me, and we had this like engaging conversation where it felt like we had known each other, we had talked to each other for a long time. Sometimes it just really alleviated my fears. And I found that the more and more I was calling people, the easier it was getting. So that's what I always remind myself, that it gets easier as you do it. And the same thing went for meeting people one-on-one. I always had these nerves, like, what if this conversation doesn't go the way that I want it to? But all of that disappears once you're sitting down and actually talking to the person. And I also do want to say, though, if the conversation doesn't go the way that you had planned it to go, that's okay. At least you sat down and had that conversation with the person, or sat on the phone and got to understand where they're at, how they're feeling. So really, it's all about just practice. And another tactic that I really love is doing this thing called a role play. So sitting down with like a friend or a coworker or a fellow volunteer and writing down maybe a script for the conversation you're about to have, and pretend that they are the person that you're trying to appeal to, or the person that you are trying to ask a question. And that role playing really does relieve a lot of nerves because of that practice.
That's a really great tip. And I definitely was very intimidated when I first started phone banking or canvassing, though what I always told people when I was at a point where I was running phone banks is I said, like, you know what, if you have a conversation with somebody, they're totally not what you're about, and you hang up and they hang up on you, that was like the best part of their day. Like being able to like indignantly hang up the phone on a stranger, like you totally made their day. So don't even feel guilty about it. Abbie, did you have anything to add to that issue of sort of confidence and motivation?
Yeah, I think definitely practice that. It doesn't come naturally for most of us. So, but I also think having a community of people that you can lean on for support, and like people who always think that you're doing great things. So if you plan an event and some people aren't into it, you still have your cheerleaders who are like, right on, I love the work you're doing. That has been really important for me, to just have some handful of friends, close people who are supportive of what I'm doing.
Absolutely. And one thing that I at least try and keep in mind is that if you don't have somebody who has like a strong opinion about the work that you're doing, either good or bad, there's a good chance you might not be doing work that has the sort of transformational impact that we're kind of looking for. So it's like, just be bold. And like, if someone is disagreeing with you, good. That means you are saying something substantive. But yes, those cheerleaders are absolutely everything. And it's building those strong community connections that can really support you when it's time to really grind out some work or do something that maybe isn't your idea of the most fun thing. Though if you do enough phone banking, you'll understand that it's like the most fun thing ever, and you just get to hang out with people. So that's just my personal opinion. Dusty, do you have another question for us?
Yeah, we have had some of questions that are sort of about, hey, reproductive rights, whoa, that's controversial. I'm interested in that, but I think more globally, like, can our panelists talk to us about how it feels to be doing community organizing around controversial topics? Because whether it's reproductive rights or all kinds of different things, most of us are in controversial work. If it wasn't controversial, it wouldn't need community organizing, right? So how do you do that when you know some people really, really disagree and they might be aggressive about it?
Yeah, thanks for asking about this. I think that for me, I just come back to I'm really lucky that I get to organize on an issue that I am personally affected by. Like, I started as a Planned Parenthood patient and I still am, because the quality of the healthcare is just that good. And so, but, you know, in addition to my own experience, I've had the honor of hearing a lot of personal stories from a lot of other Planned Parenthood patients, or maybe even people who needed birth control and abortions and testing before those things were even legal. And so I always come back to the personal stories of the people that are affected by the threats to reproductive health care, both in Maine and nationally and globally. And that's part of what grounds me. And that's something that I would say about confidence too. You know, whether you're facing opposition or not, is just being really like firmly grounded in knowing that oftentimes the fights that we're fighting are life or death for some people. And even if they're not life or death, it's still vitally, vitally important. So, but, you know, also, no matter what you do, whether you're phone banking or canvassing or whatever, you are going to run into we call them antis. I have a phrase that I learned from one of my organizer mentors, peace and release, just like, thank you for that opinion, bye-bye. You just brush it off your shoulder, and then you've got a funny story to tell your friends later. So in a way, I guess my long and winding answer is center yourself in the urgency of the issue, and if you run into somebody mean, just brush it off.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anybody else have something to add when talking about an issue that some find, you know, very controversial?
I have a little bit of a different experience since I work with folks in poverty and on topics of economic justice, because poverty impacts people regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their race or gender. So oftentimes we do have moments that come up where people bring up topics that they just don't agree on. And that's when we take the opportunity to have an open discussion about those issues with our people. We usually gather, well, now we're gathering using Zoom meetings since we can't gather in person. But we have meetings with like 20 to 30 folks, and that's an opportunity for us to guide the conversation using a social justice lens, and making sure that the values that we uphold as an organization are guiding that conversation.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. Yeah, and if nobody had anything else to add on that topic, I think we can move on to another question. But thank you for offering that perspective as well, Ambureen, because I think sometimes the best conversations are the ones where people totally are not seeing eye to eye. And I think a skill that I've really respect in a lot of community organizers is that ability to moderate a conversation between two people that don't agree with each other in a way that leads to some greater understanding. Because you can usually learn something from somebody who disagrees with you, even if you don't agree with them. That's fine. Dusty, did you have another question for us?
Yeah, I love this one. How do you balance your personal opinion with community opinions or community needs?
That's a super good question.
I would just like quickly say again, those are the opportunities where I take the time to have an open discussion using social justice guidelines. So making sure that economic justice and racial justice is at the forefront of those conversations so that folks aren't getting harmed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like there is, we have to be really mindful of like levels of harm in conversations and in actions. And I think that if we're leaving out opinions in our communities, or hiding some or trying to avoid some, that means we're not really getting the whole picture and we're not looking at it for what it is. And I feel like if you can create spaces where you are trying to alleviate harm, but have those hard conversations. Those are some really beautiful spaces where we challenge our own ideas. Because if we're not challenging our own ideas, we're not growing, we're not getting better. We have all these systems, we can make them better, and we have to challenge the ways they work in order to do so. So those conversations are always some of my favorite when we can do them in ways where we're keeping people safe and we're protecting people, and stay grounded in that as well.
Absolutely. Though I also think that a really tricky balance that you sometimes have to strike is sometimes the right response can be, I don't know if you are coming to this conversation with the level of knowledge about the topic in order to engage in a way that is productive for everybody. And sometimes that the solution can be saying like, you know, I am not going to say like it's, you know, I try and balance the two sort of contradictory truths that on one hand, community organizing can be a space for learning. And on the other hand, folks from marginalized communities shouldn't have to be the primary educators on issues that impact them directly. Like for me as like a gay person, I don't need to explain, you know, why I think that like marriage equality is an important thing to every single person that I come across. And so it can be a really, delicate balance. But I do think that creating some good community guidelines to have that productive conversation and just working that into every single time you have a community conversation like that can be really transformative in the space that you set up. Dusty, did you have, oh, Abbie, it looks like you had something to add to that.
If you don't mind, I just was thinking about how this plays out and when your opinions might be different than your community's needs. And I think it shows some of the growth at the organization that I work for, because we used to be a women's only organization, and now we serve the entire LGBTQ plus community. And that growth happened from listening to the community and like engaging in different cultural competency trainings through other community partners. So we did need to do some shifting of opinions within our organization to make that change. And I think it was really powerful.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you. And that's that constant redefinition of the scope and goal and community that you serve is one that should constantly be happening. I know that at Maine Women's Lobby, we've had a lot of those conversations as well in the last year. Dusty, did you have another question for us? I think we probably have time for like 2 more questions, and then we're trying to end around 4, but this has just been fabulous so far.
Okay. What keeps you going when it gets hard?
So one thing is getting to work with like the coolest people in Maine and in the country is really helpful in doing this work and knowing that we're all in it together. I go to an annual conference where part of the conference is one of the nights is a dance party, and that like gives me life for another year. And I think the other thing is remembering that we are in this for the long haul, and that we need to look at ways that we can be sustainable in ourselves. So for me, for a while I played roller derby, and that was my outlet. And I'm in search of a new outlet, but I think the ways that we can find those things that just keep us going there is really important.
Awesome. Any other tips and tricks for keeping motivated? Because this work can be tiring.
I see community organizing as a form of self-care, in that we talk about, we use the phrase leadership ladder. I'm sure other organizations might use other terms, but that's how we describe how we try to organize our volunteer teams. So the longer you might volunteer with an organization, the more skills you're going to pick up and the more leadership opportunities you're going to get. And then maybe someday you'll find yourself totally running a phone bank on your own, and you're going to know where all the supplies are, and you're going to know how to do the messaging, and and I see that bringing folks up that leadership ladder and building power with everyone and building skills with everyone as self-care, because the more people I have around me who have those skills to be leaders in the movement, the more I know when I'm having one of those days where I just need to take a nap and play Animal Crossing and go to bed, that I know that y'all are going to be there to have my back. And so it's going to be okay for me to take a rest, and I'm going to know that the fight is going to keep moving even if I need to take a break. And then I can do that for you when you need a break too. So I think, bringing more people into the movement and bringing us all up so that we're all ready to be leaders, then that's how we do it. That's how I keep going when it gets hard.
You can't be on all the time. And, at some point you need to know when to say, like, no, today needs to be a me day, because if I check Facebook and I do all those things, I'm not going to be at my best if I want to do this work for a long time. Any other tips and tricks on staying motivated, staying healthy? Obviously, just own a cat and a Nintendo Switch, and it's pretty much all you need, I think. Yes. Great. Dusty, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, the last question that we had lots of submissions for is, folks in middle school have a different platform than people who are doing this work professionally. So how can they best use that platform to begin activism and organizing right now?
Y'all are such respectful panelists. I totally appreciate that. Why don't we just start off with let's start off with Maggie, and then we can all kind of give our little, how best to get involved. And also, maybe if you just wanted to say quickly, how folks can get involved in your organization, or actually, you know what? Later on, you guys can send me that information, and I'll send it out to the Girls' Day folks.
Awesome. I'd love to start this one. One thing I would say is value your voice. And if people around you aren't valuing it, value it for yourself. And like Abbie and everybody touched on, find your people. Find your people who are going to support that voice and also help you learn and grow that voice. So there's a million things we can all be doing, but just know that what you think and what you believe in and what you're yelling at the void is really important, and keep believing in it and keep going.
Wonderful. Anything else to add? Ambureen, maybe?
That was so beautifully said, Maggie. Thank you so much for saying that. I completely agree with all of that. And you have power now, and you don't have to wait years to get started. If you want to start a group at your school on an issue that you really care about, like environmental science or climate change or a GSA, like a Gay Straight Alliance, you don't have to wait. If you have friends, if you have community, or if you just want to create a group and watch people come in, maybe there are people at your school or in your community that are interested in the same things that you are, and you don't even know it yet because you haven't connected. So just remember that you don't have to wait to get involved. And the same goes for organizations. I'd love to see more boards that have young people on them, more organizational boards that have young people on them, young people getting involved. You can get started now.
Absolutely. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Looks like not. So, and I think another thing that I would just add on to that is that it can be really beneficial to just, if you find an issue that you are really passionate about, just start doing some research and just like getting those facts. Some of the most impactful ways that you can actually reach out to another person and maybe change their mind on something or change their perspective is just through a person-to-person conversation. Like, that is so powerful. That's why we canvass. That's why we have in-person events a lot of the time. And if you know what you believe in and can really kind of speak to that, you're already helping out that issue just by being somebody who is informed and aware and is sharing that with other people. And that is beautiful transformational work. So, I just want to echo all the panelists when I say, like, you are not too young, you are not too inexperienced, you're not too anything. There might be some folks, and I think one thing that I just wanted to add on the topic of getting the word out as a student is that there are a lot of students out there who have really radical, fabulous, important points to make. And people who don't want to hear them just say, well, you're a student, so you don't know anything, or you're a child, so where's the adult who's putting this up, putting you up to this? There are 1.5 million ways for people to discount you from sharing your opinion. And that starts when you're at school. It doesn't necessarily stop when you're an adult. But that's just a part of the work, and that means that you actually have something that's important to say, because it's getting under someone's skin enough for them to try and discount your voice, because they're saying, then that's them saying your voice actually has impact, and I don't want that. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining. This has just been so much fun, and especially I see Jillian and Maggie around pretty frequently. So I miss seeing everybody in person, but it's been so lovely that you were all able to join. So thank you. Let's have just a big round of applause for all of our panelists. And sorry, Dusty, were you?
Sorry. I was just wanted to jump in too before we got going, and maybe you were already going to say this. And I apologize, but of course, thank you to the panelists, thank you to the awesome chatters and watchers, and also we have a big favor for you all out there. We cannot do this programming without our sponsors. We have awesome sponsors who pay to make this possible.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the thing that we do to thank them is make sure that we are tracking that this is like a worthy event. That you're learning from it, that we hear from you about what you're learning, and that we are making sure we know how we can make it better next time. So what I need you all to do is click on this link in the chat box, take 2 minutes to do a really quick little survey about this session. I'm going to ask you to do one after the next one on Thursday too, and then one at the end to wrap it all up as well. So I don't want to like overload you with surveys, but I also really want to hear from you about what's really working about this, so that we can do our best job to make it good for the next girls and let the folks who are paying for it like know that their contribution had value. So I would love it, and I'm gonna plop that in there one more time, so go do it for me.
Yeah, and I'll send out a follow-up email as well to folks, just plugging this, and it's going to be the same form for all of our live sessions, so you just are going to pick the live session that you went to and give us your feedback. We really appreciated your feedback on the last session, and already we have just some good ideas. And the last session, we actually learned a lot about how to do something like this a little bit better. And we're all learning the ways of Zoom. Also, it seems like Skype just kind of died and nobody talked about it, but I don't know where Skype went. But we're on Zoom now. It's 2020. So yeah, I think that is pretty much it in terms of our panel. I think I wanted to just I'm going to keep this session open until 4 o'clock, just so that folks are still able to find that form in the chat, because I know that the chat goes away when things stop. But I'm going to be stopping the recording in just a minute, but thank you everyone for coming today. And we are so excited to see you for our next session on Thursday. Actually, Jesse, do you want to give a quick synopsis about what our Thursday session is going to look like? Just since we have a couple minutes.
Sure. On Thursday, we are having a panel of 6 legislators. We've got 2 senators and 4 members of the Maine House of Representatives. And so it's an hour and a half of Q&A with them. Like, what's it like to be a legislator? How do you get your bills through? How do you work on a committee? What's it like to be on the floor of the House chamber? Like, if you have questions, then that's your moment to hear about it. One thing that you might do to get ready for that, if you have not yet been over to the Girls' Day website, it's super awesome. So you can head on over to that Girls' Day website that Logan has sent you. Somebody might drop it in the chat now if that's helpful too. There are a bunch of videos on there that you can watch in addition to this. One of them is just a short 20-minute, like how a bill becomes a law. It's just me and a PowerPoint chatting. But if you want to hear me for 20 minutes talking about like how legislation goes through the process, that could be a good prep for you before Thursday. If you're interested, and might help you think about some questions that you can bring to that session. And while you're over there, you can do the Flipgrid also, send us the selfies.
That was another thing that we were thinking about doing it as the icebreaker question, but just a like, what are you already doing to enact change in your community? But it didn't fit on a donut chart in a way that I found aesthetically pleasing. But we do have Flipgrid, which is a really cool way for you to submit a short video response to our prompts. And one of them is, what are you already doing in your community? Because we know that there are folks your age that are doing transformative work in Maine already and around the world. So if you wanted to share that on Flipgrid, we would love to see it. Also, if you don't mind, if you have like a selfie in your Girls' Day t-shirt, you could hashtag it Virtual Girls' Day, and we'll see it and be like, oh my God, that's such a cool t-shirt. So yeah, I think we're just about at time. So thank you so much to everybody for joining, and we will see you on Thursday. Thank you again to all of my panelists. I miss you all so much, and I hope to see you all soon in person. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.